On the early morning of May 29, 2023, farmers in Longwang Township, Hezi City, Shandong Province, China, began another ordinary day of work just like any other. They shouldered their hoes and walked along the narrow paths between the fields to reach their farmland. As they passed by an open well in the middle of the fields, a well that villagers commonly used for irrigation, a sharp-eyed man suddenly stopped and frowned. Something wasn't right. This well had always been covered with a cement lid, but this morning, the lid appeared to have been deliberately shifted to one side, leaving a gap exposed. What made him even more suspicious were the fresh, still wet mud stains clearly visible on the edge of the lid, as if someone had recently touched it, perhaps just the night before or earlier that morning. Curious, he called over several other people working nearby to take a look. They bent down and peered through the gap in the well cover, trying to see what was below. Then, one of them suddenly cried out in horror. In the murky black water of the well, something dark was floating listlessly. Upon closer inspection, it looked exactly like a clump of human hair drifting on the surface. The others didn't dare get any closer and quickly called the police. The sound of police sirens soon shattered the peaceful silence of the quiet village. Within moments, news had spread throughout the community. Villagers gathered at the scene in growing numbers, everyone whispering anxiously, their faces showing clear signs of worry and fear. When the rescue team pulled the body to the surface, the victim's identity was quickly confirmed. It was Liu Shui, a young man who had just turned 21, living in the neighboring village. When Liu Shui's mother heard the terrible news, she couldn't bear the enormous shock and fainted on the spot, requiring emergency medical treatment. Family members, still in disbelief, said that just the evening before, Liu Shui had been happy and healthy. He had even taken his newlywed wife to visit her parents' home for dinner, and the couple had looked very happy together. How could someone so alive and healthy become a cold corpse at the bottom of a well after just one night? Liu Shui's family refused to believe this was an accident. They insisted he must have been murdered and demanded that the police investigate thoroughly. Liu Shui was born in 2004 and was the only son and the sole hope of his entire family. His parents were honest, hard-working farmers who toiled year-round on their plot of land. They lived frugally, saving every penny they could, keeping all their savings for their son, hoping to one day arrange a decent marriage for him. Liu Jie was fairly handsome, but his personality was so honest it bordered on naive, and he was somewhat slow and awkward in social situations. He had no higher education and no special talents. Besides helping his parents with farming, he only knew how to do odd jobs for hire, doing whatever work anyone asked of him to earn extra money. Growing up under his parents' guidance, Liu Shui didn't have many dreams or grand ambitions. His only wish was the same as most young rural men, to marry a good wife, have a few cute children, and live a peaceful, simple, and stable life together as a family. Eventually, a matchmaker introduced Liu Shui to a potential bride. The girl was also 21 years old, named Liu Na, quite pretty with an attractive figure. Liu Shui was pleased from their first meeting, secretly happy that he would soon have a wife. But before his joy could fully set in, the bride's family demanded a bride price that left his entire family speechless. 600,000 yuan, equivalent to roughly $82,000. In the Hez region of Shandong, it wasn't unusual for the bride's family to demand a high bride price, but 600,000 yuan for an ordinary farming family like Liu Shui's was an unimaginable sum that made everyone shake their heads in dismay. Liu Shui's parents faced a difficult choice. On one side was this enormous sum of money, and on the other was the lifelong happiness of their only son. In the end, they decided they would do whatever it took to get their son married. To raise enough money, the elderly couple emptied out all their savings from half a lifetime of work, sold all the grain and food in their house, and even went door to door to borrow from every relative they could find. But the poor old couple had no idea that the sky-high bride price they were desperately scrambling to gather was actually a one-way ticket sending their son to his death. On March 17, 2023, a grand wedding was held at Liu Shui's home. The small house was lavishly decorated with colorful lights and flowers, and a festive atmosphere filled every corner. Relatives and neighbors came in droves to offer congratulations, everyone praising what a good-looking couple they made and how blessed the groom's family was. Liu Xue's parents were the happiest people that day, beaming from ear to ear the entire time. For them, this was the most important day of their lives. They had fulfilled the sacred mission that every parent hopes to accomplish, getting their son married and settled. All those years of hard work, all those sleepless nights of worry, now seemed to have been worthwhile. As for the bride Liu Na, draped in a pure white wedding dress, her face beautifully made up, though she wore a constant smile, her eyes revealed a coldness and distance. Liu Na was also born in 2004 from Longwang Township, Dan County, Hezi City, Shandong Province, not far from Liu Xue's home. The two had met entirely through the matchmaker's arrangement, meeting a few times and exchanging casual conversation, barely getting to know each other before the marriage was finalized by both families. In truth, from their very first meeting, Liu Na had no feelings whatsoever for Liu Xue. In her eyes, this guy was too countrified, too honest to the point of being boring, clumsy in speech and awkward in behavior, completely clueless about romance. The type of man Liu Na liked was someone worldly, someone who had been around, smooth-talking with a bit of a bad boy edge, not some simple farmer who only knew how to bury his face in the fields. But Liu Na's parents thought differently. They actually liked Liu Xue precisely because of his honesty and simplicity. In the eyes of older folks, an honest man is trustworthy. Someone who doesn't know how to party and fool around will know how to take care of a family. Their daughter would have a stable life and wouldn't have to worry about being mistreated or abused. What ultimately pushed this marriage forward was actually a remark that Liu Na thought was just a joke to brush things off. She had no intention of marrying Liu Xue, so she deliberately demanded the astronomical bride price of 600,000 yuan. To her surprise, Liu Xue, honest to the point of being foolish, heard the number without flinching and immediately went home to tell his parents about the bride's family's demands. Even more surprisingly, Liu Xue's parents didn't bargain or negotiate at all. They accepted completely, scrambled everywhere to raise the money, and eventually delivered the full 600,000 yuan in cash. Liu Na was stunned, unable to believe her eyes. She never expected they would actually pay that much. And so, looking at the pile of money in front of her, she changed her mind. She agreed to the marriage, but not because of Liu Xue. It was entirely for the money. This woman had already calculated everything clearly in her head. Most of that enormous bride price would go to her parents for their retirement and to fund her younger sister's future education, while she herself would also get a decent share of private money. As for Liu Xue, she didn't care about him. She'd get married first and figure things out later. After all, divorce wasn't exactly rare these days. She could leave whenever she wanted. As one might expect, life after marriage was nothing like the sweetness Liu Xue had imagined. From the very first day as a daughter-in-law, a massive rift had silently formed between the young couple. Liu Na had achieved her goal. The bride price was safely in hand, her mission accomplished. Her attitude toward Liu Xue immediately did a complete 180. She no longer maintained the gentle facade from when they were dating. Instead, she showed open coldness and contempt. She criticized Liu Xue for being useless, for not knowing how to make money. She complained that her in-laws were nagging and meddled in everything. All day, she just held her phone, chatting with friends outside while ignoring all household chores as if they weren't her responsibility. Liu Xue saw everything, understood everything, but he chose to silently endure it. He knew full well how hard his parents had worked, how much they had scrambled just to bring this wife home for him. So for the sake of family harmony, he told himself he had to be patient. He took on all the housework by himself, from cooking and washing dishes to doing laundry and cleaning. Every day he even tried to cook different dishes to please his wife. Even when Liu Na threw unreasonable tantrums, getting angry for no reason at all, he would lower himself to coax and comfort her. Liu Xue's parents were the same way. They pampered this daughter-in-law as if she were royalty, giving her whatever she wanted, never daring to say a harsh word, afraid that if she got upset she might pack up and go back to her parents' home. But all the patience and servile pampering from Liu Xue's entire family couldn't win even a shred of genuine affection from Liu Na. After less than 2 months of marriage, Liu Na was already sick and tired of this dull, rural life. Every day was the same thing, stuck in an old house, looking outside to see nothing but fields and dusty dirt roads. For her, this was pure torture. She wanted to divorce immediately, take the money, and go live the free, carefree life she had always dreamed of. But reality dealt her a devastating blow. The customs in this rural area were very strict. A newly married woman who demanded a divorce would be gossiped about and looked down upon by the entire village. More importantly, the law had clear provisions. If the bride's family initiated a divorce shortly after the wedding and the groom's family had committed no serious fault, the bride's family had to return most of the bride price. This was what truly gave Liu Na a headache. Most of that enormous 600,000 yuan bride price had already been given to her parents, and the rest she had already squandered almost completely. She now had almost nothing left. Where would she get the money to pay it back? On top of that, there was another practical problem staring her in the face. Once divorced, she would have to face the prying eyes and gossip of the villagers, who would say she had committed marriage fraud, that her parents were greedy, and only knew how to grab other people's money. Liu Na might have been beautiful on the outside, but inside her soul was terrifyingly dark. When she saw that the path to divorce was blocked, a horrifying thought began to take root in her mind. What if she became a widow? She started researching this question carefully online, and she discovered that if her husband died, not only would she not have to return a single penny of the bride price, but as a widow, she could legally inherit all the assets in Liu Xue's name, including the house and the car that his parents had gone into debt everywhere to buy. That way, the money would still be hers, and freedom would still be hers. Plus, she'd get even more assets. On top of that, she could receive sympathy and pity from everyone around her. Everyone would feel sorry for the young woman who had become a widow. It was like killing multiple birds with one stone. Once the idea of murder had taken root in her mind, it was like a seed that kept growing and could no longer be suppressed. From that day on, whenever she looked at her husband, who smiled at her naively every day, devotedly serving her tea and water, Liu Na no longer felt any warmth or gratitude. In her eyes now, there was only cold indifference and disgust. In May 2023, when the marriage had just entered its second month, the opportunity Liu Na had been waiting for finally arrived. A few days earlier, she had quietly gone alone to a pharmacy in town, lying to the pharmacist that she had been having trouble sleeping lately and was experiencing nervous exhaustion. She bought a box of powerful sedatives, the kind that if taken in excess would cause muscle relaxation and mental confusion. May 28th was an ordinary Sunday, but Liu Na's behavior that day was completely different from usual. She got up early, dressed nicely, and most notably, she wore a rare, warm smile on her face. She approached Liu Xue and, in a gentle voice, said she wanted to visit her parents' home and invited him to come have dinner at her parents' house that day. Liu Xue was overjoyed when he heard this. After 2 months of marriage, this was the first time his wife had been so sweet and affectionate with him, even calling him honey. His heart nearly burst with happiness. He was as excited as a child getting a gift and immediately agreed. Before leaving, Liu Xue specially picked out his newest, nicest clothes to wear and neatly combed his hair. The young couple got into the car that Liu Xue's parents had gone into debt everywhere to buy as a wedding gift and set off for her parents' home. At the dinner table at his in-laws' house, the atmosphere seemed warm and harmonious. Liu Na was like a different person, constantly picking up food for her husband, asking about his well-being non-stop, and even breaking from her usual habit to personally pour Liu Xue his first glass of liquor. Liu Xue was an honest man. Seeing his wife so happy and gentle, so different from usual, with his in-laws sitting right there, his heart was filled only with joy and happiness, without the slightest suspicion or wariness. His in-laws also kept offering him drinks, and out of politeness he kept raising his glass, drinking one cup after another. Liu Xue wasn't good at holding his liquor. After a short while, his face turned red, his mind grew hazy, and soon he was about 60 to 70% drunk. Around 9:20 p.m., dinner was over. Night had fallen, The sky was pitch black, and the village roads had no streetlights, eerily quiet. Liu Na suggested they head home. Since Liu Shui had been drinking and couldn't drive, this time Liu Na got behind the wheel while Liu Shui sat in the passenger seat, his head spinning, eyes drooping, drowsy with sleep. The car left the village, and after driving for a short distance, Liu Na suddenly pulled over to the side of the road and stopped. She calmly reached into her purse and pulled out a bottle of mineral water and the box of sedatives she had prepared beforehand. Carefully taking out exactly 6 pills, she turned to her husband with her sweetest smile and held the pills up to his mouth. "Honey, I can see you drank too much today and must have a headache. These are hangover pills I specially bought for you. Take them quickly and then sleep it off, and you'll feel better." Her voice was sweet and gentle, like honey dripping into his ears. Liu Shui, in his drunken state with his mind no longer clear, didn't think twice. He took the water bottle, tilted his head back, and swallowed all 6 sedative pills, a dosage strong enough to knock an adult unconscious. The car continued rolling through the pitch-black night, but not toward home as Liu Shui vaguely assumed. Liu Na turned onto a deserted dirt road. The road led to a desolate, empty field where there was an abandoned open well. Inside the car, the sedatives began taking effect. Combined with the alcohol he had consumed that evening, Liu Shui felt the world spinning around him, unable to open his eyes, his entire body going limp without a shred of strength. At this moment, Liu Na began executing the second step of her carefully calculated murder plan, psychological manipulation. She stopped the car, turned to shake her husband who was drifting between consciousness and unconsciousness, and fabricated an absurd story. In a soft voice, she said, "Honey, do you remember the dream I told you about before? I dreamed that if we catch a fish from a well and eat it, we'll have a baby boy." Then she pointed toward the well ahead, urging Liu Shui to go down and check if there were any fish inside. If there were, they should catch one and bring it home, and then they would soon have a child to carry on the family line. By now, Liu Shui's consciousness had completely descended into chaos, but deep in his subconscious, the instinct to please his wife that he had developed over time still remained. Hearing his wife say she wanted a child, wanted fish, he simply forced himself up, stumbled out of the car door, and staggered after Liu Na toward that terrifying pitch-black well. Liu Na calmly opened the well cover, revealing the dark mouth of the well. She stood beside it, urging her husband to lean down and look inside to see if there were any fish. Liu Shui obediently followed her instructions, lying across the edge of the well, straining to peer down below. Then, a pair of hands from behind gave a hard push, and his body plunged straight down into the deep well. The bone-chilling cold water and the violent sensation of suffocation jolted Liu Shui partially awake. His survival instinct surged powerfully. He thrashed wildly, his legs kicking frantically in the murky black water, his hands desperately clawing at the rough, jagged stones of the well wall. He called out his wife's name over and over, begging her to save him. Liu Na was still standing right at the mouth of the well, looking down at her husband struggling in the cold water. Of course, she didn't reach out to save him, nor did she have any intention of calling for help. Then, perhaps to create an alibi, or perhaps to find one last fig leaf to cover her conscience, Liu Na pretended to panic and ran back to the car, started the engine and drove away a short distance, then turned the car around and came back. At the bottom of the dark, cold well, Liu Shui still hadn't given up hope. He summoned his last reserves of strength, enduring the excruciating pain, using his fingers to claw into every tiny gap in the well wall, painstakingly climbing up inch by inch. Later, when his body was discovered, people saw that his fingernails had been torn off, the tips of his fingers had been worn raw, and his blood had stained a large section of the well wall. Finally, through extraordinary willpower, he managed to grab hold of the well's rim. He lifted his head and saw the familiar face of his wife standing right before him. But what awaited him wasn't his wife's hand reaching out to pull him up. It was another hard push without a trace of mercy. Liu Na's eyes at that moment were filled with murderous intent, cold as ice. Her mind calculated rapidly. If he survived, her plan would be completely exposed. Not only would she go to prison, but she wouldn't be able to keep the $82,000 bride price either. Without hesitation, Liu Na used all her strength to push Liu Shui back down into the well. This time she gave him no chance whatsoever. She quickly lifted the heavy cement well cover and sealed it shut, completely cutting off all hope of survival for her husband. Liu Na stood silently in the quiet of the late night, calmly straightening her disheveled hair and rumpled clothes. She looked around to make sure no one had witnessed what had just happened, then turned, got into the car, and started the engine. As if nothing had happened, she drove back to her parents' house, climbed into bed, and fell into a sound sleep. In her mind, everything was over. Tomorrow, she would just need to play the role of a grieving young widow, crying and mourning her husband, and she could embrace her freedom and fortune. After Liu Shui's body was found at the bottom of the well, police immediately launched an investigation. As the last person to be with the victim, Liu Na naturally became the most important witness summoned to the police station to give her statement. Facing the investigators, the newly married wife put on quite a performance, appearing so grief-stricken she seemed to have lost the will to live, tears streaming down her face. In a choked, halting voice, she told the police a story that sounded absurd at first, but seemed to align with the superstitious beliefs still deeply rooted in the minds of rural people in this region. Liu Na testified that on the night of the incident, after having dinner at her parents' house, the couple drove home. On the way back, she told her husband about a strange dream she had the night before. In the dream, someone told her that if they threw coins into a well or caught and ate a fish from a well, they would soon have a chubby baby boy. Liu Shui believed it completely, and because he loved his wife so much and desperately wanted a child, he insisted on going that very night to find a well to try their luck. She had tried to stop him, but he wouldn't listen. When they arrived, because it was pitch dark and he couldn't see the road clearly, and because he had drunk quite a bit at her parents' house that evening and was unsteady on his feet, Liu Shui accidentally slipped and fell into the well. She was so terrified she lost her mind, running everywhere trying to find someone to help, but the surroundings were completely dark without a single soul in sight. No matter how much she called out, no one could hear her. By the time she returned to the well, there was no sound at all from below. She panicked, not knowing what to do, and afraid her in-laws would blame her for not taking good care of her husband. So in her fear, she fled back to her parents' house and didn't dare tell anyone. At first hearing, this story seemed like a tragic misfortune caused by backward feudal superstition, the kind of thing not uncommon in remote rural areas. However, the experienced investigators weren't so easily fooled. Their professional instincts told them this matter was far from simple. Behind Liu Na's story were too many illogical points that couldn't be explained. The biggest point of suspicion was Liu Na's reaction. Think about it. A girl barely in her early 20s witnesses her newlywed husband fall into a deep well, and her first reaction wasn't to frantically grab the cell phone she always carried and call emergency services or the police. Instead, Liu Na claimed she was so scared that she chose to flee back to her parents' house. Even stranger, when she got to her parents' home, she didn't tell them what had happened or ask for their help. She simply climbed into bed and slept soundly through the night as if nothing had occurred. This kind of behavior, calm to the point of being cold-blooded, completely contradicted the normal psychological response of any human being facing the sudden death of a loved one. A normal person in that situation would panic, would scream, would do everything possible to get help. No one could just calmly go to sleep like that. The more the investigators analyzed, the more abnormalities they found. They decided to conduct a deeper investigation into Liu Na. Liu Na was the eldest daughter in her family, with a younger sister 10 years her junior. In the local rural area, families with only daughters and no sons often placed their hopes on their daughters, either expecting them to bring in a son-in-law to live with them or hoping that when their daughters married, they would bring back a substantial bride price to fund the parents' retirement and raise the younger children. The investigation revealed that Liu Na had never been an obedient child who put her parents' minds at ease. In this era of internet explosion, with information from all over the world flooding online, she had been exposed to all kinds of temptations from society at a very young age. Before she had even finished middle school, her mind was no longer on her studies. Learning had become boring and meaningless to her. Entering puberty, Liu Na became even more rebellious, gaining a reputation as a problem girl in the village, causing her parents endless headaches. She despised the dull rural life, tired of seeing nothing but fields every day and the same familiar faces. She admired the glamorous urban lifestyle with its dazzling neon lights, bustling shopping malls, and all the things she could only see through her phone screen. After graduating from high school, Liu Na didn't continue her education like most of her peers. She decided to leave her poor village and went alone to the big city, where she got a job as a hostess at a karaoke bar. Those years working in that environment completely reshaped Liu Na's worldview. There, she learned to smoke, to drink, and how to please wealthy customers. More importantly, she learned to measure all relationships by money. Day after day, watching men throw money around like trash at the drinking tables, becoming familiar with sweet-sounding lies and promises that evaporated like cigarette smoke, Liu Na gradually developed a distorted view of life. In her understanding, men were nothing more than tools for providing money, and marriage wasn't anything noble. It was simply the fastest stepping stone for changing one's fate. However, the police determined that Liu Na's past and lifestyle could only prove she had a motive for murder. To actually convict someone of murder required substantial evidence, not just speculation or conjecture. Therefore, they immediately began a thorough investigation of the crime scene, hoping to find a breakthrough for the case. The first abnormality discovered was the wounds on the victim's hands. When conducting the autopsy, forensic experts found that the tips of Liu Shui's fingers and his palms had extremely severe bruising, abrasions, and skin torn off. His fingernails were shattered. These were wounds characteristic of desperate clawing and grasping. The investigators analyzed that if Liu Shui had simply gotten drunk and accidentally slipped into the well, as Liu Na claimed, the victim would have been startled awake by the cold water and thrashed around instinctively, which would be normal. But it would absolutely not leave such devastating climbing marks on the well wall. These wounds indicated that the victim had been trying to climb up for an extended period of time with extreme effort, not just thrashing around before sinking. This could only happen if, after falling into the well, the victim had remained conscious for a significant amount of time and had made extremely desperate, determined efforts to save himself. Next, the police conducted a thorough examination of the crime scene around the well opening. Although the footprints near the well mouth were chaotic and complex, making it difficult to analyze anything specific, the investigators discovered an important clue. In the overgrown weeds not far from the well, there was a discarded medicine box. They picked it up to examine and recognized it as an empty box of sedatives that had been completely used up. This detail immediately raised a major question in the investigators' minds. According to Liu Na's testimony, the couple came here to throw coins into the well to pray for a child. So why bring sedatives? Someone going to perform a superstitious ritual for fertility-carrying sleeping pills made absolutely no sense and couldn't be explained. This clue attracted the police's intense attention and made them even more suspicious of the story Liu Na had told. Not stopping there, the police continued to extract and analyze video footage from surveillance cameras along the roads around the area. The analysis results showed that on the night of the incident, the car driven by Liu Na had stopped near the scene for quite a long time, much longer than would have been necessary if they had simply stopped to throw some coins and leave. More importantly, the vehicle's route didn't head straight home along the normal path, but had deliberately taken a detour onto the road leading to the remote field where the well was located. This proved that going to that well was not a spontaneous, impulsive decision as Liu Na had claimed. Faced with increasingly clear evidence, the police focused all their attention on this seemingly fragile, pitiful girl. Then the decisive final piece of evidence emerged. Forensic test results showed that Liu Shui's stomach contents contained sedative compounds at an extremely high dosage, enough to be lethal. At this point, Liu Na's fabricated story about her husband getting drunk and accidentally slipping into the well completely collapsed. Everything was now clear. This wasn't an unfortunate accident. It was a premeditated murder, meticulously planned in advance. Liu Na was arrested shortly after. In the interrogation room, confronted with the mountain of ironclad evidence that police presented one after another, from surveillance camera footage showing the car's abnormal route, to test reports on the sedative residue in the victim's body, and especially the foreign cloth fibers found under Liu Shui's fingernails, fibers that perfectly matched the clothes Liu Na wore that night, her psychological defenses completely collapsed. The girl who had been arrogant and defiant suddenly transformed into a pitiful victim, tears pouring down like rain, sobbing miserably. But even while confessing, she kept trying to justify her actions. She repeatedly emphasized that she didn't want to live with him anymore, that she was afraid returning the bride price would make her lose face, as if these selfish, petty reasons could somehow justify her taking the life of an innocent person. The case caused a huge sensation not only locally, but across the entire region after entering the judicial process. A small, peaceful rural area suddenly became the focus of public attention. Everywhere, from street corners to dinner tables, people were talking about this young woman with a heart as venomous as a snake. Public outrage reached its peak when thousands of people in the region signed a petition together, submitting it to the court demanding severe punishment for the murderer and calling for Liu Na to receive the death penalty to deliver justice for the deceased. The atmosphere at the trial was tense to the point of suffocation. When the prosecutor stood to read the indictment, describing in detail each moment of Liu Shui's desperate cries for help at the bottom of that cold, dark well, how he had tried to climb up, only to be heartlessly pushed back down again by the very wife he had loved with all his heart, the entire courtroom fell silent as death. Liu Shui's parents, sitting in the gallery, could no longer control their emotions and burst into heart-wrenching sobs that brought tears to everyone who heard them. The father, who years ago had stood straight-backed and proud while arranging his son's wedding, now looked like an old man, though he wasn't yet 50. After just one night of losing his son, his hair had turned completely white, his eyes empty and lifeless like someone who had lost all hope of living. The mother was in even worse condition, crying until she fainted, requiring medical personnel standing by to provide emergency care on the spot. Just as the atmosphere was extremely heavy, the defendant Liu Na suddenly dropped to her knees with a thud on the courtroom floor, facing her in-laws and frantically kowtowing repeatedly. While crying, she said she had wronged her parents-in-law, that she knew she was wrong now, and begged them to forgive her. She pleaded that as long as she wasn't executed, after she got out of prison she would serve her in-laws like an ox and a horse, caring for them until the end of their days to make amends for her crime. This scene made everyone present in the courtroom feel the deepest irony and disgust. When she could have saved her husband, she had heartlessly pushed him to his death. Now, facing the death penalty, she was pretending to be remorseful and begging for her life to be spared. After reviewing all the evidence and the developments of the case, the Hezi City Intermediate People's Court issued a first-instance verdict sentencing the defendant Liu Na to death. Upon hearing the sentence, Liu Na collapsed to the ground, then let out hysterical screams, shouting that she didn't accept it, that the sentence was too harsh. She immediately filed an appeal to the higher court. However, after reviewing the entire case file, the Shandong Provincial Higher People's Court issued an appellate ruling rejecting the appeal and upholding the original sentence. In accordance with legal procedures, the case file was submitted to the Supreme People's Court for approval of the death sentence. September 26, 2025 was the final day of Liu Na's life. During the months of waiting for execution in the detention center, her mental state had almost completely collapsed. She had visibly wasted away to nothing but skin and bones, her weight dropping below 99 pounds, her face gaunt, her eyes constantly filled with fear and panic. When court representatives came to the detention center to read the Supreme People's Court's approval of the death sentence, her legs went weak and she trembled uncontrollably, completely unable to stand on her own. In the end, she had to be dragged out of her cell by 2 judicial police officers. During the final visitation before execution, Liu Na refused to see her own parents. No one knows exactly why. Perhaps she was too ashamed, no longer able to face her mother and father. Or perhaps deep down she still resented her parents, blaming them for forcing her to marry a man she didn't love just for the bride price money. Or perhaps she simply didn't have the courage to face the pained, disappointed eyes of her parents in the final moments of her life. She only asked a cousin to pass a message to her parents, telling them to take care of their health and to look after her younger sister well. Liu Na was dead. Justice had been served, and people felt some satisfaction. But this tragedy still wasn't truly over. Liu Na's death could never compensate for what had been lost. Left behind for Liu Xue's parents was a shattered family. Their only son was gone forever. The hope of their entire lives was now just a cold grave. Not only that, they still had to bear the enormous debts from borrowing everywhere to pay for their son's bride price. Debts that they probably couldn't repay for the rest of their lives. The two families, because of that $82,000 bride price, had turned against each other with endless lawsuits. What was once an in-law relationship was now nothing but hatred. Looking back at this entire heartbreaking story, it's clear that these two young people were from two completely different worlds from the very beginning. They were matched by a matchmaker, met a few times, and got married before they even had a chance to truly know each other. One was honest and simple, only hoping for a peaceful life. The other craved vanity and longed for a glamorous lifestyle. Two people from two different worlds, forced under the same roof because of money. How could they possibly be happy? And that's the case for today. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.